his way into Cheetah Plains. There was a tragic moment where Ryan called me and told me he was moving north. Luckily, it seems as though he has changed his mind, and there you go. Quarantine, Karula's male offspring. And there we go. Thank you very much to all of the vehicles involved with getting us into the sighting. As you can see, there is a large trench between me and Mr. Q. I'm not quite sure which way he's going to go around it, so it might be that we could lose him. There he goes. Keep going this way, my boy. That's good. That's a good thing. I've hardly had a chance to get to know this particular male, but I'm sure that Brent is jealous. He said yesterday that Quarantine is his favorite male leopard, and one can understand why. He is such a gorgeous boy. I've only had brief sightings with him. Oh, he's sitting down. Hold on, everybody. Right, we will not be crossing that trench. How's that, Brian? Can you see him there, or shall I go forward a bit? Oh, look at him having a jolly good head rub. Oh, this amazing young male is actually enormous for his age. He's only just 4, I think. And already he's... What are you doing? Are you having a scratch, or are you scent marking? Because though you're actually having a lovely scratch. He's having a great time with that branch. But he is a big boy for his age, and he's already been seen to challenge his older brother Shimbambalana in terms of establishing territory. He is particularly advanced. Yes, well done, you caught it. You got that branch. And we're up again. There's that gorgeous face. Isn't he beautiful? Now what you doing? We haven't seen him showing signs of territorial marking yet, so he hasn't been scent marking, scraping his feet, or sawing in this area, at least in the times that we've seen him. But there is a very good chance that he is looking to establish himself in this area, which is fascinating behavior for a young male. He seems to have found himself a niche, but already at such a young age showing signs of developing that massive neck that is so typical of male leopards. Right, where are you going to go? Yes, keep going that way, boy. Oh goodness, we're about to hit an impassable watch out there, Bebop. Okay, there is a large stump there. I'm going to hope... No. That was hopeful to the point of foolishness. I was going to hope that we could push past it, but we definitely can't. It's coming right towards an area known as Buff Pan. I've lost him now. Oh, there he is. Oh, you know what he's doing? Oh, no, he's just digging. Oh, no, we're okay for now. Oh, he's still moving. All right, we're going to have to go all the way around, but it's not far. So I think stick with us, because we might end up with the last view of him at some point. So we're not going to be moving far. We just have to go around. Hold on. Watch out, everybody. You okay there, Bebop? And who dat you say you always thought Quarantine was a place? It is a place. It is the open area outside Djuma, and that is where Quarantine, the male leopard, gets his name from. When he was a young male, when he was still being looked after by Karula, he spent a large amount of time on quarantine clearings. Hence the name Quarantine, a quarantine male. If the benefit of hindsight, I actually think Quarantine might have been a slightly more appropriate name for young Sindile, just because of his history and his background. But Quarantine is named for the place that he spent a lot of time, and that's typical of naming leopards. There we go. Phew. Over the wall of Buff Pan. the newly refurbished buff pan, and there we go. We're going to have a beautiful shot of him in a second. He's going to, unless he decides to stop, he's going to come out beautifully in front of us. So yes, you're absolutely right. You're not mistaken. Come on, boy. Hello. Quarantine is a place, it's also a leopard. There he is. Now, I just missed out on seeing Quarantine and Djuma spending a lot of time on Djuma. So they are Karula's cubs, the Queen Karula. They were Karula's cubs, they're now Karula's grown boys. Yeah, he does seem to be scent marking. That's very interesting. Isn't it amazing? We're so lucky that in this case we have a chance to see one of Karula's boys actually establishing himself. Shimbambalana and Quarantine are, as far as I know, the only two male offspring of Karula that have actually stuck around in the Traverse area that we can go to. Obviously with male leopards they very often disperse, they move far. Thanks very much, Ryan. They often move very far away from their natal ranges, which is why we have been so fortunate with Quarantine and with Shimbambalana that we've had a chance, or that many of you have had a chance to see them establish themselves. Djuma moved just to the south. He's often seen on Mala Mala. They've given him a new name, but he is still Djuma to us. And that is Quarantine's twin, well, Quarantine's littermate, Quarantine's brother. Which way are we going to go, my boy? This is so cool. I was hoping this morning would bring a Quarantine sighting. He is gorgeous. Oh, Karula produces some really stunning males. Be ideal if he would stop for a second so that we could see his face, but I'm sure as it starts to get hotter he's going to slow down. He is very empty-bellied, so he is hungry. You can see that flap of skin between, sort of around his chest and then around the middle of his legs, between his legs. So he is a hungry boy. He is on the hunt, but I think just cruising, sauntering along. Look how big he's got. I so wish that I had had the opportunity to see a Quarantine and Djuma moving about. Now, I'm going to reposition so that we can get a nice view of a Quarantine's head, and it is quite dense in here. So while we do that, I'm not entirely sure what James wants to show you, so let us go and find out. Perfect timing, because just about to get a really truly stunning view of Quarantine. He's still very much on the move, and he's looking utterly spectacular in this morning light. Tail twitching, just like his mum, while he's on the hunt, searching for something to feed off. I have, in my drive here, I didn't see any impala herds, but they could be hiding in this thicket. We're not far away from Cheetah Plains Pan, and I'm hoping that he is going to go and have a drink in that open area. From what I've been told, a Quarantine has a way of choosing perfect poses. He poses beautifully on termite mounds and trees, and obviously he doesn't do it intentionally, but he does make for some incredibly photogenic situations. His tail twitching away, white-tipped, very clear, very visible compared to the rest of his almost beautifully camouflaged fur. Rest time. Perfect. Let's go and move around him so that we can see his face, since this morning is providing us with such beautiful light. And that's what leopards do. It's what all big cats do. They walk for a bit, sit down, have a rest. I don't think he's going to stay long. I think he's going to be up and moving again in a relatively short space of time. So let's take advantage of his stillness for now. Let's squeeze through here. Hello, Q. You gorgeous boy. Isn't he absolutely lovely? Now, because he is a leopard that I am not 100% familiar with, I'm speaking with my voice very low, just to make sure that he's accustomed. I've always heard that Quarantine is very, very comfortable with vehicles. But his brother, Djuma, had inherited his mom and his aunt's tendency to occasionally rush at vehicles, growl at them, and then lie down again, something that I believe Brian has experienced before. Apparently many of you are taking some stunning screenshots. Please do, because my camera battery's flat, and I would love to be able to share this with you. Young male leopards are always utterly gorgeous. Not that all leopards aren't. Natasha, that's exactly what I was thinking. I didn't say it, but it was exactly what I was thinking. That Mr. Q is the perfect leopard model. And he is. For now, relatively unscarred. He's got 1 or 2 scratches on his nose, probably from fights with his brother. The odd, no tears in his ears. He hasn't got droopy just yet, although his jowls are looking a little bit droopy. He doesn't have the sort of the droopiness to his face in the same way Tingana does. Hello, boy. Now, I'm not quite sure exactly what was happening with Quarantine and Nkanyeni on Nkoro. Nkanyeni has 1 male cub who is over a year old now. In fact, I think he must be close to 14 months. And I imagine that in the not-too-distant future, Nkanyeni might be coming into estrus. I know that they had a brief scrap. I don't know if it was a scrap or just Nkanyeni was trying to draw Quarantine's attention away from her male cub. But it could be that she's coming back into estrus in the not-too-distant future. And that would probably, we'll never know for certain, but that would probably be Quarantine's first conquest, his first female. And that's a relatively young age for a male leopard, because they are sexually mature at around 2. They're able to reproduce, but they generally don't have the opportunity to do so. I'm not sure where Shimbambalana is. Perhaps he's occupied further into the Kruger, which is further to the east of us, but not far. I think Shimbambalana probably has a massive territory that extends completely outside of the Sabi Sand, because of course there's no fences between here and the Kruger National Park, so he may well be in there defending his territory elsewhere, and perhaps Q is taking the opportunity. Now, Dark Princess, the perennial question. Your question is whether or not Karula would know that this is her son, were they to cross paths now several years later, or 2 years later. Almost 2 years since he dispersed. Yes, I think she would. I strongly believe that she would. I think that all of the leopards in the area know each other, and they know their mothers, their sons. As to how they would react to each other, that's a different story. The fact that they know that they're related and that they're mother and son isn't necessarily going to inspire close family feelings. And it's quite common to see females with new cubs and their previous generation, so their previous offspring, sharing a kill together, for example, or patiently tolerating each other's company. That happens regularly with leopards before the older offspring disperse and move off. But now Quarantine has dispersed and moved off, it's impossible to predict how he would react. Leopards are notoriously difficult. They do odd things. I could say to you that he would respond aggressively to, maybe not aggressively to Karula, but he could potentially behave aggressively towards her cubs, because he's a male and that's what his instinct tells him to do. He would also potentially mate with his mom if she were in estrus and he happened to encounter her. And they're not governed by human rules, and inbreeding is common and does occur. But I could come around the corner one day and find Karula, Quarantine, and her 2 cubs contentedly sharing an impala. It's unlikely, but that's the strange sort of things that leopards do. especially within families of leopards. They're not social creatures, they're not geared towards socialization, but odd things happen. Flop. Now, the one thing Mr. Q is exceptionally good at is hunting kudu. It seems to be his speciality, and it seems as though James has found some of his favorite food. No coaxing has happened here, and Quarantine seems to be very content at the moment and very much enjoying his morning nap. He's not completely flat though. Well, he is now, but he wasn't a second ago, and he keeps lying down and then lifting his head and lying down and lifting his head, and I think perhaps he's decided that this is a good spot to spend the rest of the day. And the reason I think that is because we're between two water holes. Now, there is a little bit to the south and to the west of us, there is a water hole known as Cheetah Plains Pan. Now, there is a vast open area that lies between where we are and Cheetah Plains Pan itself. And of course, open areas are not really a leopard's friend. They are secretive stealth hunters, they're ambush hunters, and when there's no cover, you can't ambush something, which Quarantine will know. And probably what he's thinking about doing is a lot of the time, animals will move about around the open areas, especially at night or in the cool of the morning. But as it starts to get hotter, they start to want shade, and they'll move and cover, and they'll start to move into the thickets surrounding a waterhole. And there is, well, here actually, is where Quarantine will come into his own in terms of ambushing something. So he's going to doze away, save up his energy, and wait for some unsuspecting creature to either go and have a drink, or perhaps come from having a drink and seek out some shade. And he's going to rely upon his incredible sense of hearing to alert him to the presence of an animal moving about in his vicinity. And so there's no point for him right now to go searching. He's just got to wait. Ian and Kira, who are 9 and 6 years old. Welcome to Ian and Kira. You want to know, how far does Q roam? Well, Ian and Kira, he roams very far. Now, with a young male leopard. Oh, you're dreaming. You're awake now. Just getting comfortable. With a young male leopard, they can actually walk very, very far. So they can walk hundreds of kilometers, hundreds of miles in search of a territory. Now, Q hasn't needed to walk quite so far. He's found himself a nice spot close to his mom's territory. But his territory is probably roughly the size, or at least the area that he moves around in, and let me just think about this for a second, is probably at least the size of 2,000 football fields. Maybe even a little bit more. Now, I don't know exactly because I haven't spent enough time with Q, and he isn't found all that often. He can be quite secretive unless he's on Cheetah Plains and in Coral. And of course, he does move about around in the Kruger as well. So we don't know exactly how far he roams or exactly how far he goes. But if I had to guess, I'd say maybe somewhere around 2,000 football fields. And when he gets bigger, that could actually be even as big as 4,000 football fields. So it could be even larger. But that's just to give you a sort of a rough sense of scale. That's in hectares, by the way, for those of you watching, give or take a little bit. So it's actually a massive, massive area. He covers Cheetah Plains and Coral, Torchwood, and Kruger as well. Right, if you are determined to keep your head down there, Mr. Q, then I'm going to go all the way around. I keep calling him Q and then immediately thinking of James Bond. I'm thinking about repositioning and going around and perhaps trying from the facial angle as opposed to the bottom view. So while I decide whether or not to do that, let's go over to Brent with one of the most brightly coloured birds. A leopard that would leave very big footprints in the sand is fast asleep. He is quite content to spend, I think, the rest of his day here. So what I've done is I've marked the position on my map because we really are about as far from a road as we could possibly be out here on Cheetah Plains. So I've marked his position on a map so that this afternoon on the sunset safari we'll be able to return to him and see whether or not he has had any success. I'm very chuffed with the way that this morning has gone. I did say to James earlier this morning, I'm going to try for quarantine on Cheetah Plains, and we're so lucky that he obliged. There was one moment there when we were approaching the sighting, and Ryan called me in and said, Jamie, he's going north, which would have been north into Nkoro. We got lucky that he decided to keep sauntering south. Thank you, boy. Yes. Now, Kelly, while our leopard snoozes away, you wanted to know how long do leopards spend sleeping in a day. It's very circumstance dependent. So if it, for example, a female like Karula, she actually spends very little of her day, well, in cat terms, very little of her day sleeping, unless she has a kill, in which case she could spend easily 12 to 20 hours catnapping away. But for the most part, if she doesn't have a kill, she will be wandering around searching for food. She's got 2 cubs to provide for. So she missions. Even at the hottest time of the day, you can find leopards moving around. They're very unpredictable like that. But they can, much like their lion cousins, they can happily sleep for 20 hours a day. If they've got a full belly and a comfortable, safe spot, they're going to spend most of that time catnapping. They're not terribly concerned about being awake. They'll go and find themselves a safe spot if they've got a kill, safe spot in the tree. They can doze contentedly knowing that nothing's going to attack them up there. So they are almost as good at lions as sleeping. As lions at sleeping, is the words I was trying to use. But as a general rule, they tend to sleep less. And of course, they're generally mobile throughout the night, moving throughout the night. They'll stop and rest every now and again, stop and lie down every now and again. And I have to say that a lot of my surprise leopard sightings have been in the middle of the day as well. I remember going out once with Scott on camera, and we just said, because we'd had to go out late because it was so hot, our camera kept shutting down. We just said we are going to struggle this afternoon. And we came around the corner, and there was Tingana sleeping in the shade, and then he got up and continued to move, despite the fact that it was 100 degrees Fahrenheit. While our beautiful leopard snoozes away, we're going to start making our way back towards Djuma. Let's go and see what Brent has found for you there.